Hello and welcome to our latest Brexit broadcast. My name is Ian Moran. I'm the Group Customs and Trade Solutions Manager at EV Cargo Global Forwarding. I hope by now that you're getting used to our new name. During this afternoon session, which will last about an hour, I'll run through the key issues that clients need to be mindful of now that UK has left the customs arrangements of the European Union, and I'll be highlighting some new aspects. Today I've been joined by my colleague Carl Noble, who's our Overland Commercial and Trade Lane Manager, who has first-hand experience of the marketplace and the issues experienced by those at the sharp end. In addition to this recording, you'll be provided with links to the presentation, which will include links to the government's guidance, which provides more in-depth information, so you will have a reference document to refer to. Our broader presentation into the changes are still available on our website, which covers matters such as wood packing and more detailed information about custom clearance arrangements. And if you have any questions following this presentation, do contact us and we'll try our best to help you. So moving on to the agenda for this afternoon, these are the areas we're going to cover. We'll be particularly focusing on origin goods, which is a key area for many of our customers at the moment, and some of the other aspects that we're coming across as we head into January and getting used to the new arrangements. So post-transition, what next? One of the good news stories about the agreement, or perhaps we should be calling it the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, which has been agreed between the UK and the EU, is to actually continue talking. As many of you may have heard on the news broadcasts, there are a number of loose ends in the agreements. It focuses on mainly to do with trade and moving goods between the EU and UK, and it's quite light on areas such as the service sector. But there's commitments on both parties to actually continue to discuss arrangements and to fine-tune the arrangements moving forward. This is particularly good news for us, because many traders are suddenly finding that some of the arrangements in place are not as easy as they hoped, and are providing stumbling blocks to trade. So we've got the Partnership Council, the Trading Partnership Committees and the working groups, which have all been established to try to improve the state of play that we have at the moment. And it's quite important to note that this does include things like customs cooperation and rules of origin, and also looking at the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, because these are areas that we do hope that in due course there'll be closer cooperation between the UK and EU, and hopefully we can actually get rid of some of these barriers which are either in place now or will be coming into place later on this year. So let's just remind ourselves of the various changes which are taking place. In particular, we're going to focus on customs declarations in a second, because that's a key area that we need to be mindful of. And the other issue I'd bring your attention to, which certainly is causing concern in the road haulage industry, is the common transit requirements, whereby hauliers who are moving goods from the UK inland into Europe are required to have transit guarantees and transit documents. And we're finding a lot of hauliers don't have these in place. And certainly we're getting a lot of requests from people saying, can we borrow your guarantee? Which is not something that we like to do willingly. But we'll move on to customs clearance. And if there's one slide you need to take note of today, this is probably the most important one, because a lot of our customers felt that when we had a deal, that there would not be a need or requirement for customs declarations either going to Europe or from Europe. Yes, that is not the case. Customs declarations are required for all goods which are moving both to Europe and from Europe. And just as a reminder, for importers, it's your responsibility to make sure your goods are declared to customs. And what we're finding at the moment is that a lot of road hauliers and carriers are making use of the simplifications and are presuming that customers have in place simplified declarations, where declarations can be deferred maybe up to 6 months. And all they need to do is present an EORI number at the French border or the Dutch border or the Belgian border. That's sufficient to get them on board a ship and delivered goods into the UK. And hopefully someone down the line will actually do the customs declarations. And from our experience, there's quite a lot of this sort of thing happening. So do ensure that when you're importing goods, that someone is doing the customs declaration. So do have systems in place. And just remind your DDP suppliers, that's delivered duty paid, those people who are responsible for paying all charges, including UK customs clearance and duty, if there is any duty applicable into the UK, that's their responsibility to actually undertake the customs arrangements when the goods come to the UK. And make sure that's documented and audited. So if you do get a knock on the door from customs saying this particular shipment doesn't appear to be customs cleared, you have a clear audit trail to prove it's down to another party to do that, because it's there seems to be a lot of uncleared goods in the UK at this moment in time. So let's just remind ourselves of the changes. We are in a bit of a honeymoon period at the moment because of the simplifications, because people are bringing goods in under the cover of an EORI number, but things will change and there will be more measures put in place as we get used to the new arrangements. So the 1st of January, there were certain things that we had to do in terms of export customs declarations, and most traders have chosen to do import customs declarations. But come the 1st of April, there'll be more things we need to do, particularly in terms of importing foodstuffs into the UK. And finally, on the 1st of July, we have full controls, full checks, etc., which we're not experiencing at the moment. So particularly the items in red, I'll bring your attention to. At the moment, imports are coming in fairly freely, but from the 1st of July, import declarations will be compulsory, and an entry will be needed to be done before the goods leave the EU, before they arrive in the UK, unless you're using the temporary storage facilities and ports where goods are held pending customs clearance. Import safety and security declarations will be compulsory for imports into the UK, and also we'll have to use the new government's goods vehicle movement service for all road movements into the UK and exports to the UK, from the UK too. So just bear those in mind. And of course, food health controls, as I mentioned, will be phased in between April and July, and health certificates will be required for many types of goods. So from the 1st of April, health certificates will be required for goods of animal origin, and that includes things like eggs and honey, and then all goods requiring phytosanitary and sanitary certificates will be required from the 1st of July. So one of the good news stories of EU exits and the end of transition is that the UK government has actually managed to negotiate trade deals with most of those countries we had trade deals with before. I think there's only literally a handful of countries where deals are still being negotiated, and the government is hoping to get some solutions to those fairly early on this year. The generalised system of preferences procedures, GSP, they're going to continue essentially as is. And just traders must be aware that in terms of the certification that's needed and the proof of origin, the government will allow GSP copy certificates rather than having the need to have full certificates, originals, and also origin declarations will be acceptable on invoices and packing lists as well. And if you're still got cargo in the process, for example, in customs warehouses, VEX statements will be allowed on invoices so long as they're dated before the 31st of December 2020. Origin of goods is one of the key areas and one of the key concerns that we have at the moment, and many of our clients are now wrestling with these new obligations. Now, essentially, the free trade deal with the European Union only applies to goods which are of EU or UK origin. So if we're importing a shipment from, say, Japan into the EU and then re-exporting it to the UK, those goods will not benefit from the free trade agreements that we have with Japan, unless the goods move to European Union countries, are not customs cleared and come directly to the UK. So that's most important. And likewise, if we're shipping goods to, say, Japan via the EU and they're customs cleared in the EU, they're not subject to preference. So that's quite an important step. And it's probably even more so important that if you're moving goods from, say, Italy to the UK, they're Italian origin goods, and then redelivering them to say, Ireland, unfortunately, even though they're EU origin, they'll be still subject to customs duty. And this is a huge issue for the industry. Now, representations are being made to both the European Union and the UK, because we don't believe that the sentiment of the agreement is that these goods should be subject to EU customs duty, and hopefully common sense will prevail, and there will be a change in regulations. But at this moment in time, if you're moving EU goods from one country to another and then you re-export them to another third country in the EU, unfortunately customs duty, it looks like it is going to be due. So there are also some product specific rules in terms of origin. So they do vary from commodity to commodity. So if you have a particular requirement for origin criteria for, say, garments, it will be somewhat different for the automotive sector. So do look at your commodity codes. And one of the main aspects of the trade deal is dealing with origin, and many of the 1,200 odd pages in the document cover the origin criteria situation. So there's actually four types of rule that products are required to meet, either on their own or a combination. There's the wholly obtained origin. So if you're growing, say, cabbages or carrots or lamb in this particular example, 100% of the goods are going to be origin of that country where the actual goods have come from. The other aspect that quite often does apply to goods is if you change the tariff heading. So if you're importing wood and you're going to make a wooden yacht out of that, clearly there's a change in tariff heading from the code that's used for importing wood to the actual commodity code that's applicable to a yacht when you export that. So in that case, you can claim UK origin if you're using imported wood from, say, Canada. And in terms of value percentage, which tends to be the case with garments, there's a percentage rule. Perhaps 40% of the goods may be made from outside the origin country, say the UK, 60% is UK, and you can just about claim it's going to be UK origin. But do look at commodity codes because it does vary depending on the products you're actually moving from A to B. And then there's also specific processes that you tend to need to have special dispensation or just clarification from customs whether this would be appropriate. And a good example of that is a chemical mixing it with another chemical, providing a chemical reaction which changes the product. And again, that could be sort of claimed to be an origin criteria. So if you think about origin and the difficulty it's causing our industry, those of you who ever bought a new car would be very familiar with sort of the shopping list of options you get. So for example, if you're buying a car made in the UK and you're going to export it to Germany and you want to claim it's going to be UK origin, what you have to bear in mind is that if you're having a 1.6 engine, it may be built in Mexico, whereas the 1.8 engine may be built in, say, the UK. And that could have a huge implications on the origin criteria of the car. So it is a bit of an issue for traders when they're moving goods around Europe. It's so difficult sometimes to actually have the actual origin for each product, particularly if it's a car where bits and pieces are made from all over the world. So one good bit of news about origin is that once you actually state that the product is of, say, UK origin, and then that product goes into another product, such as a motor car in Germany, that whole item can be claimed as UK. So if you're making an engine in the UK and it's partly made of components from, say, Japan and Mexico, but because the majority is actually of UK origin, the whole item becomes UK origin, and then that could be actually moved to Germany, put into a car, and the car can be deemed as UK EU origin, and then the European Union manufacturer can actually claim it to be origin criteria and claim duty dispensation when that car might be re-exported to somewhere like Mexico, where the European has a free trade agreement. So all complex stuff, but it's fairly well documented now, luckily, but there are lots and lots of different bits of government guidance to look at to get to grips with this complex subject. So just to give you a graphical picture of the different issues that we actually have when we're sort of dealing with origin criteria, here's a great example of a shipment from South Korea moving via the United Kingdom, customs cleared, then with a destination of France. Unfortunately, we can't claim origin in France, so customs duty would be payable. Likewise, we take an example of some goods made in Turkey, shipped via Netherlands, moved into temporary storage in the Netherlands. That's under customs control, not customs cleared, but then re-delivered to the United Kingdom. And yes, we can claim origin status there because the goods haven't been brought into EU free circulation. They've stayed under custom control and can be delivered to the UK with preference claimed. And likewise, if we had the same shipments going to Turkey into the Netherlands, but customs clear the Netherlands with EU duty paid and then re-exported, even though the goods are from Turkey, unfortunately, they will be subject to double duty, well, not double duty because there's duty free in the Netherlands, but certainly duty in the UK. So the options for clients, and there are options. One thing is to perhaps open a customs warehouse. This is where you can bring goods into the UK, enter them into a customs warehouse regime. The application process takes about 60 days, maybe a little bit longer at the moment due to the pressure on customs. But the benefits are that you can suspend payment of duty and VAT in the UK. And if those goods then get re-exported to the European Union, you then sort of move them without having to pay UK customs duty, and then you pay the EU duty on arrival in the EU. The other thing that a lot of customers are now looking at, rather than shipping via the UK, is shipping direct. So rather than the goods coming from, say, Bangladesh to the UK and then onward shipments to Germany or Holland or Italy, what we're proposing, what we're offering to many customers now is direct shipments from Bangladesh directly to an EU member state, where the goods can be customs cleared and then re-delivered. And certainly we're working very, very closely with our offices in Holland, Belgium, France, Germany, Poland, etc., to try and offer these solutions to our customers. Or the status quo, because one thing you have to bear in mind is the cost of these different options, because operating a customs warehouse does have costs. Direct shipments from Asia to EU member states may not be the most cost-effective option because shipments are small. You may have to ship LCL rather than full load containers, but you have to offset those costs against the duty you would be paying otherwise by bringing the goods into the UK. So do bear all these things in mind. So check your duty rates and compare the costs of the different options. So one of the things we need to bear in mind is that we need statements of origin. And the UK is being particularly flexible in this area at the moment. So to import goods into the UK, what is acceptable at the moment is a statement of origin provided by the exporter on a commercial invoice or packing list. This can be per shipment, or it can be a one-off statement, particularly if there's multiple shipments of the same product. And bear in mind that all this has happened really, really quickly. Lots of people haven't had time to actually convey the new requirements to customers. So customers are allowing us a year to actually get our act together. And one thing it's a lot of people looking at nowadays, and which is permitted by regulations nowadays, is we can use importer's knowledge. So long as the importer has good knowledge that the goods are of origin status, and that might be historical documentation, it might be a supplier's statements to say that the goods are originating in, say, India or Bangladesh, that will suffice. We had one customer a couple of days ago was questioning about, they're a regular importer of wine from Spain. Can they use importer's knowledge? Well, probably yes, because for the volume of wine they're bringing in, it'd be probably not very cost effective to actually suddenly import wine in from Argentina into Spain, then into the UK, and label it off as product to Spain. So you've got a good idea of the product, and that people have been to the wineries and have actually, you can evidence that, and that's usually sufficient evidence to claim importer's knowledge, because there's a good knowledge of your people you're buying the wine off, or whatever product you might be buying. So it's quite important to make sure you have a good audit trail when you are using this importer's knowledge statements, because what you don't want to do is in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, when customs ask the question, do you have evidence that this particular importer is actually manufacturing or producing or growing the products in this particular country? You need the evidence to back that up. And if you don't have the evidence, there's a good chance customs might say, well, could we have the duty please for that last period of a year, 2, 3 years, whatever it is. So just is an important thing to have ready, these statements of origin. So exporters will usually be identified in statements of origin. by a reference number. So we have been used to using VEX numbers over the years, and in the European Union, the VEX number system is going to continue. In the UK, exporters don't always have VEX numbers, so the company's EORI number would be sufficient to place on the invoice, which demonstrates there's a UK sort of origin there, and there's a reference number that the authorities can actually follow up through should the need arise. And just one reminder about records: you must keep records, and these have to be held for 4 years, and no need to have a paper record. It can be held electronically, but just make sure it's kept safe and accessible should the demand be from customs. So another one of the benefits of EU exit has been the move on the 1st of January to postponed VAT accounting. So traditionally for many years, we've actually been paying or accounting for VAT on imports. And those of you with deferment accounts, just for example, today, the 20th of January, there was an import. You would pay that by direct debit on the 15th of February. So you've got that very short time in which to actually make that payment to customs. And one of the benefits of postponed accounting is that instead of actually declaring it and paying it on import, we declare it as normal on the customs entry by just coding the entry slightly different to what we used to do. And then the VAT would be actually taken on your VAT return, on your regular VAT return, perhaps every quarter, and you would account for it and set that off against any VAT income you receive from selling the goods onwards to your clients. So it's quite a good benefit in terms of cash flow. So for example, today's January, instead of paying out the VAT in February, you'll probably pay out on your VAT return perhaps in April. So that's a definite benefit there for customers. So if you're trading with us at EV Cargo, all you need to do is just drop us a line, and if you would like us to use postponed accounting for your imports. It doesn't apply to those of you who are shipping goods directly to Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol. VAT will be debited to your clients in Northern Ireland, as is the case now on your invoices. And so that's essentially where we are with postponed accounting. So all you need to do is contact your local freight forwarder or your local EV Cargo office, and we'll make sure your entries are coded accordingly. You will need to register with the government by sort of going into your government gateway accounts and opening up a CDS account, Customs Declaration System, even though we won't be using necessarily the CDS system to do declarations now. This is what we need to do in terms of applying to get these VAT certificates. So you apply online and you'll be able to access your government gateway accounts every month, get the statement, and make sure you download it, because these statements are only available for about 6 months before they are archived by the government. So as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, VAT is going to continue to be accounted for as now for goods sold between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And when the Northern Ireland customer receives the VAT invoice from a seller, he'll use that as evidence to reclaim VAT as normal on his VAT account. And just bear in mind that those of you trading in Northern Ireland, you do need an XI EORI number to do some business in Northern Ireland. And hopefully most of you by now would have registered with a trader support unit who have been issuing these new numbers to the trade. So the Northern Ireland Protocol, I think we all are aware that we need to be doing these declarations for Northern Ireland. It's been a bit of a struggle because the systems haven't quite been in place to do the required declarations. But we do need to do declarations for Northern Ireland exports or movements to Northern Ireland. Very limited information is required at the moment by the Trader Support Service. But for goods coming from Northern Ireland to the UK, no declaration is needed unless you're using special procedures such as inward processing or customs warehouse. There's no export entry, no import entry needed for goods coming from Northern Ireland to the UK, just for goods going to Northern Ireland. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a second. So the practicalities of the Northern Ireland Protocol are still very much work in progress. As we've mentioned on previous broadcasts, we've been preparing for EU exit since the referendum in 2016, but the Northern Ireland Protocol crept around about middle of last year, and we've been wrestling to get things in place since then. So one of the trials and tribulations of the Northern Ireland Protocol is that our industry has been required to use the new customs declaration service to do entries, because this can actually cope with both the UK and EU customs tariffs. And it's been quite a struggle. The customs declaration system is not ready yet. And so most goods are moving to Northern Ireland, but just a very basic safety and security message at the moment. And work is still in place to try and get CDS up and ready, early part of this year for the full import declarations which are required. So lots of talk going on between the parties. There's still lots of ambiguity about what goods are at risk, because one of the requirements of the Northern Ireland Protocol is that goods that are at risk of going to the Republic of Ireland should be declared with duty paid. And if the goods actually happen to stay in Northern Ireland at the end of the day and didn't move to the Republic, you could actually reclaim that money back. But how this is going to work is still a bit of a challenge for the authorities, and we're still waiting for some good guidance on how that's going to work. Supermarkets in particular have really struggled because of the volume of business. They're just-in-time distribution models, and the government has actually allowed a stay of execution, a period of 3 months in which to try to improve the actual way we can actually gather the information, particularly for foodstuffs going to Northern Ireland. So there's been lots of documented situations about some shelves running dry on certain items of fresh products because of the more complex requirements to move goods to Northern Ireland. And there's certain aspects, things like chilled meats. I think sausages was one of the products which was mentioned, which will be banned under the new regulations. Well, there's been some dispensations that they can continue to move to Northern Ireland for at least the next 6 months or so. And also the government is going to support some of the costs for the industry to get ready for these changes, such as veterinary costs. And I suspect we all know that vets are quite expensive to get hold of if you can actually find a spare vet, because they need to evidence all goods of animal origin. So the government is trying to negotiate with the EU to see whether any more simplifications can be actually achieved down the line. One of the biggest industries which has been impacted by the Northern Ireland Protocol is the fast parcels industry, because it's frequently you may have 5,000–6,000 items on board a trailer going to Northern Ireland, and there's maybe several trailers per company going over each night, if not more. And the requirements to actually do safety and security declarations, let alone the customs declarations, have been so onerous that many organisations said, well, look, we just cannot do this, help. So right at the end of the year, last couple of days of December, I think it was, customs, or the government decided that the fast parcels industry can continue as was, and there's a 3-month period which time the two parties are going to look to see if they can actually have some sort of easements to actually make moving parcels and courier packages to Northern Ireland a good deal easier than the requirements at this moment in time. So those of you trading with the European Union, I'll just mention this slide briefly. Incoterms, most important, just to understand what your obligations are as a trader and what the obligations are of your suppliers and also your customers. And it's most important that when you're doing business with your suppliers to check what Incoterms you've agreed to, because we're coming across many situations where exporters from the UK to Greece and Italy and Germany are really, really struggling, because if they're selling DDP, their buyers are basically saying, we want nothing to do with the customs declaration, we want nothing to do with customs duty, and we really don't want to be involved with the VAT either. You really need to be based in our country or have an agent in our country if you want to continue to do business with us. So when you are considering situations like that, do think of the marketplace, do think of who your opposition is, who the competition is, and if you're competing against the European Union company, you need to make sure you have the ability and the operation in place to actually compete and make it easy for your clients to keep on buying goods from you. And that quite often might mean having a local VAT registration, a local EORI number, or maybe selecting a partner that can actually work on your behalf to make a local supply of goods and to debit the client directly, charging local VAT. So there are options out there. It isn't easy, but there's an awful lot of people still pushing back in this area, particularly in Germany, because the German Customs Authority is not particularly happy with non-EU countries selling on DDP terms within Germany. And likewise, if you're selling X works, just bear in mind that you may want to keep your client suite and offer to do the export declaration in the UK, because it may be that if they find that difficult to do, and certainly lots of the road hauliers that we are dealing with aren't really geared up to do customs declarations. So do that, so do mind that sort of situation too. And just think of your obligations. And I mentioned earlier on about if you're an importer buying DDP terms and you're expecting your supplier to do all the arrangements, including the customs declaration in the UK, just make sure that they actually are doing that, because what you don't want to happen in a month or 2 months or even 2 or 3 years' time is for customs to come to you to say you bought these goods from Italy and for the last 3 years, and we can't see any recollection of you doing a customs declaration for these goods. Can you explain? And when you point it out to, well, it's not my responsibility, it's the supplier's responsibility, they'll want to see evidence that you have made arrangements to ensure the supplier is doing that work on your behalf. And if you haven't got that audit trail, it is possible, of course, that customs could come to you and say, look, these goods are subject to customs duty. You might be importing them from Italy, but they are of Chinese origin. Therefore, we want some customs duty, please. And they can go back that 3-year period, and it can be quite costly. So I'll just gloss over this next couple of slides, but it's something that Carl's put together, which just demonstrates the typical export process and the different stages which are now involved moving goods from A to B. So this is all the obligations of the different parties to move an export from the UK to destination, and the different sort of parties that one needs to deal with, and in terms of documentation and all the new fiscal arrangements. This is by no means what happens on every case. This is just a typical export process flow, but it'll give you a good idea of the extra barriers that we now have to deal with when we're shipping cargo to the EU. And the next slide deals with more of the import process, bringing goods into the UK, again, looking at all the different stages. And this slide will be available in the pack after this presentation. So one thing I'll must point out to you is the customs invoice valuation. This is quite important because at the moment, well, up to now, we haven't really had to deal with customs other than Intrastats and EC sales listings for European trade. But now we must make sure that when we declare cargo to customs, we use the right value. So it's not good enough just to use necessarily the sales value, because the sales value used to move money from one company to another company may not be sufficient for the customs purposes. So what customs are interested in when we do a customs declaration is the physical movements of goods, not any services, but the physical movements of goods. So to give an example, if you're exporting something to Germany and it's a machine, and your sales invoice covers the cost of the actual products itself. It also covers a guarantee period of maybe 2 years. It also covers installation costs and the service fee. It may well be that you're debiting someone, say, £50,000, but the actual value of the goods may be just £40,000. What UK customs are interested in and what German customs are interested in is the actual value of the goods, the £40,000. So it's important that you might want to issue a customs invoice just for the £40,000, and that the £10,000 can be ignored because it's not relevant to the actual physical movement of the goods. And if these goods are subject to customs duty because they don't meet the origin criteria, clearly you're going to save your customer quite a bit of money in customs duty. So do bear that in mind. Likewise, if you're importing goods from, say, Portugal, you've made some, your supplier's made some garments, and maybe again they're not subject to the duty-free under origin arrangements, and you've perhaps paid a deposit of, say, £10,000 to get the production going, and you're going to pay the balance of £40,000 on delivery. Now, the sales invoice, which will be traditionally generated for the delivery aspect of £40,000, isn't good enough. You need to know the £10,000 deposit too, because that's got to be declared to customs, because that covers the value of the goods. So you need a customs invoice of £50,000, which covers both the two sales invoices, one for £10,000 and one for £40,000. So do check your valuations are correct, because it's important that we actually declare import goods as the CIF value of the goods. That's the cost of the goods, the insurance premium, and the freight. And that's what the expectations are of customs. So within this presentation that you'll be sent, there are various links which you can actually use, which gives you the more definitive requirements of customs when you're doing customs valuation. So if you're buying anything, it's free of charge, even though there's no physical money paying between you and your supplier. You still need to declare a value to customs, and any duty and VAT is based on that value. So you can't just put free of charge and expect not to pay any customs dues on that import. So you must have some sort of realistic value. And from experience, those of you who have had goods going through the pre-shipment or pre-clearance part of customs at Milton Keynes or Hayes, they have a nasty habit of picking on occasional importers from time to time, and instead of examining goods, they're very, very keen to look at valuation in particular to make sure that the proper value is declared to goods. And if they think you've underestimated the value, or your suppliers underestimated the value, they have got the right to impose the value themselves, which of course you can challenge, but it does delay the delivery of the shipments. So do ensure when you're issuing invoices to your European to clients that you include the payment terms, Incoterms, who's responsible for the movements, customs tariff headings. We need 8 for exports and 10 for imports. Again, making your client's job at destination a good deal easier. If you add the 10-digit commodity code, you'll be in their good books, and clearly states the type of goods, the nature of the goods in simple language, and try to avoid using more complex trade terms which may not be understandable by the person doing the customs declaration or customs should they want to make some checks. And don't forget to do state the origin of the goods. That's most important. And certainly from our experience, customs authorities in Europe are paying particular attention to the origin of goods. So unfortunately, if you're shipping something to, say, Germany, and you've got 10 items on your invoice, all with 10 different origins, you do need to state those on your invoice. You can't just assume that, well, there's 5 of them are from China and 2 are from Korea and 3 are from India. Let's just put China down there. You must actually state the origin of each item, because that's one of the requirements. And customs have got quite good systems because they know where things tend to come from. So I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Carl Noble now, who will give you a review of where we are at the sharp end of bringing cargo into the UK and exporting cargo into Europe. So Carl, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl Noble. I'm a commercial and trade lane manager for our Overland division. And since the middle of last year, I've headed up our Overland response to Brexit and getting our preparations and all our ducks in a row, working closely with Ian's team. Today, I want to give you a market update focusing on 4 key areas. So the volumes and the comparison of the volumes. Although we're only 3 weeks into 2021, there's been some big changes, and I'll demonstrate those later. How the inland border posts are coping and the flow of the traffic through those. What impact both of those are having on lead times. Lead times now being affected. And then what all 3 of those aspects are having an impact on the freight rates, which is probably the most important thing for everyone. How much extra is this going to cost us? So moving on, the volumes for 2021 compared to 2020. On average, Dover imports, there's about 2.5 million trucks a year moving through Dover, which equates to about 7,000 a day. Now, on average, for the first 3 weeks of this year, we've only seen around about 1,000 trucks, which is about 15% of the normal levels. That's stats coming from the Institute of Export. So obviously the volumes coming through Dover are very low compared to what they are. We fully expect that to change in the coming weeks. I think There was a big surge across all markets before Christmas, as most companies got their cargo in and exported their cargo out before Brexit happened, to try and avoid any VAT and duty and just any snags that were at the customs border points. Those same companies have kind of held off in the first 2 or 3 weeks of this year, but we're fully expecting that to rise very soon. So at the moment, the actual borders, the border points, the ports, the likes of Dover and the South Coast ports as well, really are at very, very low volumes. In stark contrast to that, the inland border posts are absolutely full. With the main port, the main border post is Waterbrook in Kent, which is actually in Ashford. It's got around about 1,000 spaces for trucks, and it's on a pre-booking system, so you have to book in advance. You can't just turn up, and that is full and has been full practically since day one. There is another part literally next door, which is Sevington, which the government were hoping to have up and working, which has got 1,700 spaces, but we're now hearing that Sevington won't be open until March at the very earliest. So there is a very big issue with in terms of the inland border posts, and the same is it's across all of them in terms of North Weald and Warrington are experiencing big volumes as well. But in particular, the two in Kent are really are at capacity at the moment. Compare that to the SI Brexit operating system, which is the French border control system. They estimate that it's only about 20% capacity at the moment. So although the border points, the inland border points, are full up in the UK, the actual crossings are still very low. Again, we're fully expecting that to change over the coming weeks. The other thing as well that is becoming apparent more and more is that the EU are increasing their border checks. For the first week, certainly for the first 10 days of 2021, there was the border checks within the EU were quite lax. That we are seeing that beginning to tighten up, and that's having a real impact, obviously, on the flow of cargo as well. You have the next slide, please, Ian. Thanks. So obviously those two factors, the small numbers coming through the ports, but the big volumes in the inland border control posts are having an impact on lead times. HMRC tell us that the current wait time at Waterbrook is 65 minutes. But a study carried out by the RHA last week indicates it's closer to 6 hours. So obviously every truck coming through Waterbrook, and that's where the majority are going at the moment, because Sevington isn't open, are having to wait around about 6 hours to either get their documents stamped so they can leave the country, or get their documents closed so they can come into the country. Obviously as well, we've still got the COVID testing taking place, that all truck drivers still need to a negative test, sorry. And although there are lots of testing points over the country, around about 80% of the tests are still being done at Sevington. There is a small part of the Sevington park that's open, that's conducting all of the COVID tests. So at the moment, a standard export truck, a full load truck from the UK, let's say moving from Birmingham, will go to Birmingham, they'll have to go to Waterbrook to get his documents, he'd have to go to Sevington, then to get his positive or his test, his negative test, and then he can leave the country. And because of all of that, it's having a massive impact on the lead times. There was a study conducted by the Grocer magazine in conjunction with the RHA, the Road Haulage Association, that said that the usual round trip times between Europe and the UK were 4 days. That was last year, and that was the average last year. At the moment, they estimate it's between 7 and 8 days. So lead times are almost double what they should be at the moment. So all of that is obviously having a big impact on the freight rates. On average, the freight rate, we had a peak in December, as we said, the costs per kilometre per euro were around about €6, whereas usually they're around about 150 per kilometre. Currently, we're seeing levels of between 2 and 3 euros per kilometre, which is still around 60% higher than normal, which is again is having a big impact. Another reason for the freight rates increasing is around about 60% of the volume of foreign vehicles on the UK roads, we're talking trucks and trailers, are either Romanian, Irish or Polish, and with the Polish having the lion's share of that 60%. Now, at the moment, what we're seeing, a study conducted by the British Polish Chamber of Commerce, has showed us that 3 out of every 4 trucks at the moment, Polish trucks, are happy to go back to the EU empty rather than taking a load from the UK, because they don't want to get caught up in the potential hold-ups in Waterbuck and with the COVID testing and that kind of thing. So obviously, the availability is greatly reducing, and that will have an impact on the freight rates. So they're the main 4 areas. So just to recap, the EU volumes are generally low at the moment. Dover seems to be coping well. They have expertise there. They've been used to it. However, the inland border posts urgently need more capacity, and Sevington needs to open in March. Otherwise, there will be serious issues around that. These delays are adding to the extended transit times for cargo moving to and from the UK. The traditional border points, such as Dover, as I said, are coping well. We've had some good news that if you're an office within Dover, we're allowed now to have our transit documents and our clearances actually done in Dover rather than the internal clearance points, which is a big benefit. But you have to have offices in Dover, which I'm pleased to say EV Cargo do and have had for a long time. And the reduced capacity and reluctance for hauliers to come to the UK has seen a rise in freight rates. So unfortunately, it's a fairly bleak picture for the moment, but we'll keep you posted. So that's back to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I've got 1 or 2 questions actually following your talk. Is there anything you think that our clients should be doing to ensure their goods arrive in the UK on time?
Yeah, we were quite prepared at EV Cargo. We started our preparations back in August or the middle part of last year. We wrote to all of our customers, getting our ducks in a row, getting their ducks in a row, trying to get EORI numbers in place, trying to get all of their customers' EORI numbers in place, just to make sure we were as prepared as possible for the changes, whatever they were, because at that time we didn't even know if we were going to have a free trade deal. So what I would suggest to customers is always have their EORI numbers ready, always have their clearance instructions in place so they know how they're going to clear, where it's going to clear, what they need to do. Have a grasp on terms of sale. You mentioned it earlier, and it's one of the things that's been highlighted to us is a lack of grasp of terms of sale and who pays for what and who's responsible for what. And obviously, finally, again, what you mentioned, in understanding the origins and what the implications are if the goods are manufactured outside of the EU.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Does it matter which ports were used? Dover versus Portsmouth or Dover versus Harwich? Are there any benefits of using these other ports?
There are, of course, because of the congestion around the internal border posts. But as I said, the actual flow through Dover at the moment is reasonably good. It's the very low volumes. Dover is still where the expertise is in terms of clearing cargo coming in, freight coming in from the EU. Dover has always been the main area of focus for trade with the EU. So at the moment, we don't see any great benefit of moving away from the short straits into Portsmouth, into Harwich. It depends entirely on how the cargo is moving. If it's unaccompanied, then sure, we can look at other options. If it's accompanied, i.e. the driver's with the vehicle, Dover still remains the best option because of that expertise that's there, I think.
Okay, thanks. So 1 more for you, Carl. There's been 1 or 2 bits of the trade press of carriers deciding to pull out of the UK market. Why is that? Is it because they just can't cope with the documentation, or?
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. I mean, our preparations, as I said, went back to last summer. It means we're coping well with the changes. We've not delayed any services. We've not pulled any services. There are some major logistics providers in the market that have done so, and some of them for an indefinite period of time as well, which is quite surprising. What we concentrated on was our core business, our customers. As I said, we went to our customer base in the summer of last year to ask them to get all of the information that we needed up front so the cargo could continue to move regardless of if we had a free trade deal or not. And I think that preparedness is really paying dividends now as we're still able to move cargo relatively freely, but with some delays, of course, as I've highlighted, certainly around the inland clearance depot. but we are still moving cargo and moving cargo successfully. And I think that's the real benefit for us.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for your help, Carl.
No problem at all.
So finally, before we end, we've got this checklist that we are, talking to customers about, just making sure that they go through each one of these individual points to make sure they've done everything they can do to mitigate any issues that there might be bringing cargo into the UK and exporting goods to the EU. It's most important you have agreements with your suppliers, with your clients, to make sure you are all aware of your responsibilities, and it's down in writing, so there's no, oh, I didn't realize that, you didn't tell me that. So it's actually documented. I can't stress enough that customs declarations, they're a legal declaration. If you're an exporter, you need to make sure your goods are declared to customs. Likewise, if you're an importer, you need to make sure your goods are declared to customs. So do think about what systems you're going to have to make sure these things happen, particularly imports, because we're fairly sure that most people have got some sort of arrangements in place for export declarations. But for imports, it's much easier to get cargo in without a declaration being done. So what I do recommend is look at your purchase ledger, look at the companies you're buying from the EU, and basically look at this ledger and compare it with customs declarations, and making sure you can actually match the two together, or have some sort of system to make sure that everything you actually are buying from the EU is actually customs cleared, or someone has actually committed to do that for you, and you have that evidence, that audit trail, just in case you get that question from customs. Particularly for exports, because for exports, transit is going to be required for an increasingly a number of goods going to the European Union. Make sure that the carriers you're using do have the ability to issue a transit document, particularly when goods are going to be cleared beyond the border, inland in Germany, inland in Italy, etc. That's going to be quite important moving forward. And obviously make sure that your VAT is dealt with, and think about lead times. As Carl mentioned to you earlier on, we do expect lead times to stay longer than they have been because of these documentation requirements. So if you think about a freight forwarder needing to do a customs declaration for exports, don't actually load your vehicle and send the documents to your freight forwarder and hope the customs entry is going to be done next half an hour to next hour or so. It probably will take about a working day for the declaration to be processed and their entry to be given to the actual carrier that they can actually then leave for the continent. And likewise for imports, make sure your clearance agent has got plenty of time to do the customs entry in good time, so the drivers, before they arrive at the channel ports for export to the UK, have got those valuable customs entry numbers to hand in good time. And think about weekends, because a lot of traffic does move over weekends, where goods are loaded on the Friday, transported over the weekend and delivered on Monday, how that's going to fit into the supply chain, etc. And think about procedures, and you may need to change and adapt some of your procedures to fit into this new way that we all have to work moving forward. And also do be aware that you may need to now pay duty on your supplies from Europe, because if they aren't EU origin and they can't be evidenced as EU origin, there's a significant chance that there'll be customs duty to pay. So there is a definitive guide about EU exit, Brexit, and this is the border operating model. There's a link to it on this slide here. It is a very significant, it's a large document, it's fairly complex, but do use it as a reference guide. So if you ever need to know the exact state of play on a particular procedure, do look at this document. It's full of links to more government guidance, and it'll give you the definitive sort of requirements for each sort of bit of the Brexit process. And this is a live document. It does get changed. I think we're on our 3rd edition at the moment, which was published at the end of December. And I'm sure that the government will be publishing further editions as things change and things become clearer. And those of you who haven't signed up to the government's website advice, there's a daily bulletin that comes out first thing in the morning. Most of the things you can probably ignore, but occasionally you'll see something which will be applicable to your industry, which will be very useful and will give you the formal guidance to work from. So I do commend you to actually getting to subscribe to these government bulletins. If you need any information, give us a shout and we can direct you to the right place to actually get hold of those. So many thanks for joining us today. I hope you found the presentation useful. A copy of this presentation will be available to you on our website. And if you have any questions on matters to do with UK leaving the European Union customs arrangements, don't hesitate to contact your local contacts at EV Cargo, and we'll try our best to help you. So thank you once again, and goodbye from Carl and myself. Goodbye.